Imagine something like this. Something like this, 60 to 80% faster than a 5700 XT. 60 to 80% performance gain just off of these quick napkin math numbers. I don't think there's no way we're seeing something that's twice as fast, because we already did the math right here. You could have a 300 or 3840 shader card and still have enough die area left that you could put a whole nother 5700 XT 7 nanometer EUV die in. Hey guys, Sobi here, and this is another one of my YouTube channels, 60 Hertz. Welcome. Today, a couple days ago, I seen a leak from WCCF Tech about NAVI 21. Supposedly twice as fast as 5700 XT, and I just thought I'd like to share some thoughts, opinions, some napkin math. Okay, so close my game here. Just got done on a live stream. Okay, so right here we have the 5700 XT, 40 compute units, 2560 stream processors, typical board power, so that's the whole chip, the whole board, everything, 225. There's numbers that are saying about 180 watts for just the core. So my thought is if NAVI 21 was twice as fast as NAVI 10, the 5700 XT, you figure if they double the size, right? So 7 nanometer plus gives you roughly 20% density gain, and then you either get 10% performance bump, which would be clock speed, or you get 10%. I think I said 10%. 10% clock speed, or 15% roughly energy savings. And I was just thinking that you figure if you take 180 watts just for the core, okay? You take 180 watts, you minus out 15%. So that's your wattage for just the core. Now, if we double that, right? So if we're going for 80 compute units, we're gonna double this. That gives us 300 to 310 watts just for the core. Now, I can see them maybe doing like a 384-bit bus, so that's 12 memory chips. But if they do a 512-bit bus, that's 16 memory chips. And GDR5X and GDR6 is roughly 2 to 2.5 watts per chip. But you figure if you did 12 times 2.5, 30. So you're already at 340 watts. You're at 340 watts, and that's not even considering inefficiency, anything else. Because if you were to double, so the 5700 XT is 251 millimeters squared, right? So if you take 20% off of that, that gives you 201 millimeters squared. You do 201 times 2, that gives you 100, based on the leak or rumor of 505 millimeters squared. This gives you 103 millimeters squared of die area. That's just there. Maybe they have some baked-in ray tracing. Maybe they're gonna go HBM. Because like if you leave some die area, like you gotta make room for HBM. And I think the whole thing is considered the die. So that would leave us to, that's, I don't think 103 millimeters is gonna be enough for stacks of HBM. Maybe 2 stacks, 8 stacks high, give us 16 gigs of HBM2E. Um, but where was it? They were saying one stack is like 5 watts of HBM2E or HBM3 that might be coming out too, which HBM2E is flash bolt. So you can see the upgrades. 3.2 gigabits per pin. So peak bandwidth per stack. You're almost looking at 500 gigabytes a second per stack. Now, if it is 5 watts per stack, okay, you put 2 stacks on there. You put 2 stacks and you're at 16 gigs or whatever. So I did a couple things here in Notepad. All right. I don't know how well this is going to show up. Edits. Bump this up. Okay. This should come up better on screen. So if we take our 20% density gain, we're gaining 50 millimeters squared. All right. And then if we take the energy savings, no performance, we're looking at 153 watts for the core. So the Radeon 7 was 331 on 7 nanometer. And it took 395 watts with 3,840 shaders. So I threw this up here. 5900 XT. Don't know what it's called. We're going to call it that for lack of anything. 505 millimeters squared. So if we double the 5700 XT, we'll end up with 5,120 shaders. So it'd be 80 compute units. That would give us 306, so 300 or 310 watts just for the core. And then you got to figure memory. So if you did a 512-bit memory bus for 16 gigs, you're looking at 40 watts just for the memory chips, okay? So that's going to put us at 350 to 380 watts. Plus some, potentially. They could clock it down a little bit, gain some energy back. Well, you still got your VRM inefficiencies and stuff like that. So you're looking like 350 to 400 watts for a card this big. And and like I said, that leaves us the 103 millimeters squared of die area. And that's also not counting any kind of ray tracing that they do. That's going to take energy. So there's no way we're seeing this. We're not seeing anything this big or bigger. Like, there's just no way. Unless it's clocked way down. I don't think we're seeing 80 compute units. Maybe the servers, they'll have it clocked down lower, for AI, machine learning, stuff like that. Maybe. And that would give us 20.6 billion transistors. But that, like I said, that still leaves us 103 millimeters squared on the die area. Okay, so now right here, no way 350 plus watt GPU. There's no way they would get slammed so hard if they're on 7 nanometer EUV and they're well beyond the 2080 Ti, the Titan in energy usage. There's no way that they can't do it. Maybe they could do 300. Maybe they'd want to do 325 or something, 2 8 pins or something. But I don't think that's... I think they're going to try doing like a Zen and Zen 2 moment, or Zen Plus. So right here we got some math. 7 nanometer, 180 watts, just for the core. So that gives us 0.07 watts per shader. And then 251 millimeters squared, which there's memory controller and cache and all that, roughly. But if we're shrinking the whole die, if we're keeping the same architecture, shrinking the die, it's roughly, it's close enough. So 251 millimeters squared on 7 nanometer gives us 0.099 shaders per, or 0.099 millimeters squared per shader. I have this backwards, sorry. Okay. So if we go to 7 EUV and we drop, if we kept everything the same and we dropped our power savings, we'd be looking at 0.06 watts per shader. And then we would be looking at 0.079 millimeters squared per shader. Like I said, not including memory controller, not including cache or any of the other stuff. And this isn't even considering any kind of ray tracing that they do. So basically, set on 7 nanometer EUV, 5 millimeters squared gives us 1 compute unit. So 64 shaders. So you might be asking, what can we do with that? So I think what we'll see is there's no way we're going to see 80 compute units. So 80 compute units would give us 5,120 shaders. And like I said, that's just the core, 310 watts. Plus you'd have to consider memory and all the other stuff. And then also if you figure if they just packed it, if they packed it with shaders, did no kind of ray tracing, or maybe they were using shaders for ray tracing. It's kind of like a system on chip where they'll set some shaders aside if you want to turn ray tracing on. A bunch of the shaders do ray tracing, so then that way you have a hell of a gaming card, right? And if you turn on ray tracing, it'll disable like a half or a quarter or a third of your die, and those shaders do ray tracing. Is that possible? I don't know. I'm not an architect. But you figure you could almost fit 99 compute units or 100 compute units, let's say. So a die packed, filled up to the brim with shaders and memory, everything. Like basically if you took 5700 XT, put it on 7 EUV, and just expanded as big as you could, okay? You'd be looking at 6,320 shaders. Like I said, it's not 100% doable. Like you'd have to either get more die area or take some shaders out to get 64 shaders per compute unit. So I think what we're going to see is something like the Radeon 7. So if you consider 64 compute units would be 4096 shaders. And that would give us 323 millimeters squared. Sorry, it's been a long day. I just got done live streaming for a few hours. I'm tired. So 323 millimeters squared. That would give you 182 millimeters squared left over for 4096 shaders. And you'd be looking at, so if you took 4096 shaders, you gave it a 384-bit bus, so 12 gigs of memory, and you did, so you would be looking at roughly 276 watts, with 12 gigs of GDDR6. So we could be looking at 275 to 300 watts, 4096 shader card. So 64 compute units, 4096 shaders at 275 to 300 watts. But if we drop that to HBM2E with 16 gigs, that would drop this card 4096 shaders, so 64 compute units, 250 to 260 watts. And that's, it's 5 watts per stack of HBM. So your core, you're looking at 245 watts at the core. And then you just add the HBM2E because you don't have all these memory chips. So you just 2 stacks of HBM2E, you know, to add 10 watts onto it. I don't know how accurate the numbers are, but I've been doing some research, so that's what everybody was saying roughly. So you would be looking at 4096 shaders, 12 gigs of RAM on a 384-bit bus, with taking your 20% more dense on 70 UV and taking your 15% power savings, keeping the same clocks. You'd be looking at either 275 to 300 or like 250, keeping the same clocks. I think this is a card we'll see. That many shaders? That's 24 more compute units, right? Than the 5700 XT. So if you go 24 part over whole percent over 100, right? So 24 times 100 divide by 40. 40 plus 60%. So you're looking at 60% more shaders. Okay, 60% more shaders, keeping your clock speeds up. 12 gigs of GDDR5 at 275 watts. Or dropping down to like 250 with HBM, 16 gigs. I don't know what the bus width on that would be. I think this is something we'll see. So if we consider this, right? If we consider dropping it down a tier, maybe this is going to be the 5900. Okay, don't know what it's called, but considering if we see this and they want to get up at here, we can be looking at a 3840 shader card, right? So 304 millimeters squared would give us enough area. This would give us enough area to put in a 5700 XT on 7 nanometer EUV. So you would have a 3840 shader card if the die area of 505 millimeters is true. You could have a 300 or 3840 shader card and still have enough die area left that you could put a whole nother 5700 XT 7 nanometer EUV die in, because you take the 251 and if you drop that for 20% density gain, you're at 201 millimeters squared, right? So that gives you 3840 shaders. You could have enough room in there for another die. Okay, so if we see this card, that's 230 watts on the core. And then if you take into consideration, because you take your shader and you times it by your watts per shader on 70 UV, keeping the power savings, and you could be looking at a maximum of 250 watts on a card with 3840 shaders and 16 gigs of HBM2E. If you do a 384-bit bus, so 30 watts. So this would be 260 watts plus some. So if they go with GDDR6 on the 64 compute unit card, we'd be looking at 280 plus with GDDR6. 250, 260 with HBM2E. So are we going to see an 80 compute unit card? I doubt it. I mean, like I said, unless they're going to section off a part of the die. So if they're going to keep a whole 5700 XT shrunk on 70 UV in the die just to do ray tracing. But like I said, you got to figure that HBM2E adds die area. HBM2E adds transistors. So you can't just look at transistors and be like, oh, this is what it's going to have, or this is what it's going to do. Keep same power, take 10% performance, and cut shaders. Okay, so that's what it was. So on 70 UV, you either get more performance or you get your power savings. So they could take the 10% bump in clock speeds or performance, and they could cut shaders out to make up for that and keep the same power. So they're giving less less shaders, but more performance per shader, if that makes sense. This is a rough sketch here. So it's not centered, but the inner square is 251 millimeters squared, right? And the outer one is 505 millimeters squared. And now you think, well, that's not double the size, but it really is because it's an area. Maybe we'll see a 512-bit bus. I doubt it, because that's 16 memory chips. All right. So if you take a look, like look at this die. Look at that. Your core and your RAM. Okay. And then you have all your power delivery, and just you're not really like cramming a thing in there, right? If we look at we look at a 290X. $16. Okay, yeah, so that's right. So this is a 512-bit bus. All right. So you got your auxiliary voltages, your memory voltages, your core voltage, all your power rails, right? And then you got to have your display out. You got to have your in. Like this is a nightmare. This is a big nightmare. I don't see them doing this, because your memory controller uses a lot more voltage, your chips use a lot more wattage, and more memory chips, design problems, the bigger PCB, runs hotter. I don't see this. I don't see a 512-bit bus. I could see a 384-bit, or I could see a so let's open this in new tab, and let's open up a 2080 Ti. This is a 384-bit, well, 350 whatever bit, but if this chip was here, this is a 384-bit memory bus. 12 chips. All right. Now that gives you, I mean, you could rotate this and have it this way, and then just keep your PCIe lanes here, but you got to make room for everything. The more chips you have, the more room you got to make on everything. So I would think, like, it just makes more sense to go HBM2E or HBM3. There's been talks of it. So if you look at this and you look at this, like, that's just chaos. That's doable, but like, look at this. Like, you could do 2 stacks HBM2, just like they did here. HBM2E. Then you got your die, your 2 stacks, and then, like, look at the card. Card could literally be chopped right here. Small form factor, simple layout, and you can change a lot of stuff if you really need to. Maybe put 2 of them there, whatever. But I don't think there's no way we're seeing something that's twice as fast, because we already did the math right here. If we did right here 64 compute units, That's 24%, or sorry, 60% more shaders alone. If they went with a 64 compute unit card, that's 60% more performance right out the gate. And then if they go with HBM2E, maybe get some good throughput up, because if it's true that NAVI is memory starved, you put HBM2E on there, you get the power efficiency, you get the bandwidth, and you're not starving the core. So, maybe you get another 10, 15, 20%. So you're looking at 80% performance, 60 to 80% performance gain just off of these quick napkin math numbers. At 250, 260 watts with HBM2E on a 64 compute unit card. So, I mean, and the thing is if they wanted to, they could bump clock up a little bit. They could just say, screw the power savings, bump clock, kind of teeter-totter, and, knock off 15% of that power savings. So they'll have a 300 watt card with 16 gigs of HBM2E, and, they'll have a 64 compute unit card with, a 10% clock performance gain, and maybe 7 or 10% power savings, and they're happy with this card at 300 watts, 4096 shaders with 16 gigs of HBM2E. Maybe, I don't know. Like, look at this here. HBM. This is a Fury Nano, right? HBM. And this is the MSI Lightning. $290X right here. Look at those memory chips. That's insane. If they need to come out with a 300 watt card, I think HBM2E is probably where it's gonna be at, or maybe they'll just take a 384-bit bus. I don't think we're seeing anything different. It's gonna either be a variant of HBM or a 384-bit bus on this card. And imagine something like this. Something like this, 60 to 80% faster than a 5700 XT. Let's look at what Fury Nano Tech power up. $596 millimeters squared. Let me minimize this here. Okay. Die size right there. $596 millimeters squared. So we would be looking at something smaller than a Fury Nano chip. Just the core with the RAM. Something that big. And the Fury takes what? TDP, 175 watts. And that was for the Fury Nano, which was a lot better binning. But let's go Fury X, okay? Look at that. 100 more watts. 100 more watts for the Fury X. The Fury Nano was like the cream of the crop. The Fury Nano was for that chip. Even just the regular Fury. Just the regular Fury, look at that. 275 watts. So if they could do this, this isn't that much bigger than what the NAVI 21 is supposedly rumored to be. It'd be smaller than this die, and it would use similar power. So they could do something like this again with HBM. Like I said, if you consider it, it makes sense. I don't think we're seeing a die packed with shaders. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what we'll see is something with 323 millimeters squared with some die left over for ray tracing, or maybe we'll just get a 323 millimeter square card with HBM. Maybe that'll just be it there alone. You know, like I said, these numbers are without any kind of ray tracing consideration. You know, maybe they'll use another 20 watts for ray tracing. Maybe they'll use 50 more watts. Maybe, like, because you're going to lose performance probably either way. So, like I said, they just section off some of your die. Like, hey, you want to turn this on? You're going to lose, like, half of your shaders. So then, if you wanted to turn on ray tracing, you would have normal 5700 XT performance because you would have enough shaders left over to equal a 5700 XT, and then you could have the other half of the die just doing ray tracing. You know, maybe that's their game plan. You know, just pack this thing up, 64 compute units. You know, maybe they'll have this and you won't be able to game on all the shaders. You know, maybe only game on, you know, this, or, you know, or if you want to turn on ray tracing, that you could just, you know, have a full 5700 XT or 2070 super performance out the gate, and it still does ray tracing on top of that. So you wouldn't lose. You'd be buying a card that has 60 to 80% more performance, just regular rasterized performance. And then if you want to do ray tracing, you're still going to have a 5700 XT 2070 super gaming performance with ray tracing on top of that. Because it'll just shuffle those cores to do ray tracing instead. And maybe there'll be 3 stacks of HBM. 3 stacks of HBM would put you at 270 watts. And maybe that one stack is set just for ray tracing. You know, maybe that's a problem with NVIDIA. Maybe that's why, you know, maybe it's just the memory bandwidth. You know, I'm sure there's other parts to it, but maybe, you know, the gaming performance and then the whole, you know, you got to have your memory filled with the gaming stuff, and then you're doing ray tracing, and it's just like all that stuff. There's not enough bandwidth there. But they couldn't go with more chips because of the PCB design, because of power, you know. And they also can't give people, you know, 16 or 24 gigs of RAM or whatever. And, you know, because then the next time, you know, people want more. So, like, you know, if you had a card that had 16 gigs, 18 gigs, 24 gigs, and then, you know, all of a sudden, the next time they come out with a card, you're going to be kind of upset if it has less RAM. That's just how people are. You know, I bought this card for $800 2 years ago for, you know, that had 16 gigs of RAM, and now I'm getting 12. Or I'm getting 11. But I think that we could be looking at a serious card here. I would think 300 watts would be like the maximum. I don't see much more than that. I mean, like I said, we could do 80 compute units, right? We could do 80 compute units and still have die area left over, but maybe the die area isn't left over because if you put HBM2, that takes up space. So you have 80 compute units, 2 stacks of HBM, and that takes up all your die space. And you have 310 watts on just the core, and then you have 2 stacks of HBM, so another 10 watts. So you might be looking at 325 watts, maybe, with HBM2E, HBM3. But if they do this, there's no way you're getting a 512-bit memory bus GDDR6. because that's gonna push the card like 350 plus. I can see them doing this. You know, maybe they drop clock a little bit. You know, they could drop clock enough because there's so many shaders that they could drop the clock enough that they could put a 512-bit memory bus on it. But I mean, you're looking at that'd be 24 gigs, right? Because it's 16 gigabit chips, so it's 2 gigs per yeah. So no 16, sorry. So 16 times 2, you'd be looking at 32 gigs of VRAM. Maybe that's the plan. I doubt we'd see that much RAM. That's nuts. I mean, they could use 8 gigabit chips that would give us 16 gigs. You know, 1 gig per chip, that'd give us 16 gigs. But I mean, it could go so many ways. I mean, it's just leaks and rumors, but you know, you have 16 chips and you times that by 2.5. You're looking at 40 watts just for the chips, and then you know the VRM inefficiency of powering that many chips. You know, a memory controller, because you got to remember. Well, it would be close because it's 256 bit on the 5700 XT, but you're also at 80 compute units, which is double of that. So, I mean, you're pretty much, you know, if you figure 225 watt, you times that by 2, and then you minus out your 15% power savings. You're like, that's 380, roughly 380 watts for an 80 compute unit card with 16 gigs of GDDR6. Like, that's just too much power. That's too much power, too much heat. I mean, the thing is, like, it would destroy. But like, they could not clock. You know, the more you drop clock, you know, the more performance you get. So it's like an exponential curve. You know, you gain way more efficiency, you know, as incremental drops in clock. But like I said, my math was based on just keeping clock, you know, gaining density, keeping clock, and taking power efficiency route. So let me know what you guys think. I don't know.